Hello everyone, my name is Avery Heilig. I hope you all are having a great week. This week with our discussion question, we had to take 3 takeaways from chapter 7 and describe how they may relate to a biblical worldview tool. And I found 3 takeaways from this week, and I just want to get started with the first biblical worldview tool that I found could be related to this week's takeaway. And the first one is, why is it possible to know anything at all? And within chapter 7, Sandrock explains that as we grow up, mainly through the middle and late childhood, we start to gain the ability to process information and then remember it. And this links directly to the question of why is it possible to know anything at all? And to answer this question, we know things because God made us that way. God wanted us to think, and God wants us to remember the experiences that we have. And we make connections in our brain and through our environment that helps us to form connections from one thing to another, and that is explained in the memory section under chapter 7. And Sandrock does a really good job of explaining how we form these little connections in our brain that help us to remember what happened in the past and relate it to something that we may read in a book or see in a movie. And it's just crazy how our brain works in that way. Another biblical worldview tool that I found related to this week's chapter 7 reading is, how do we know what is right and what is wrong? And Sandrock mentions within chapter 7 as a huge takeaway of developing cognitive skills. And he states that connectivity between brain regions increases as children develop. In a longitudinal study that followed individuals from ages 6 to 22 years, connectivity between the prefrontal and parietal lobes in childhood was linked to better reasoning ability later in development. And this leads directly to the worldview question of, how do we know what is right and from wrong? And the answer to that is that our brains as young children just form these connections with other parts of the brain to send our mind signals. And we learn what is right and what is wrong by making these connections in our brain through the experiences we take place in. But not only does our brain form connections, but we also have to learn what is right and what is wrong from the environment around us. Our parents teach us a lot of what is right and what is wrong because of what they are telling us. So if you grow up in a Christian home, your parent might have different morals for you than a child that grows up in a non-Christian family. So it really just all depends on what your environment around you is, how you know what is right and what is wrong. And lastly, the last biblical worldview tool that I found related to chapter 7 was, what is a human being? And in chapter 7, Sandrock mentions the loose movements and knock knees of early childhood give way to improved muscle tone. Thanks both to heredity and to exercise, children double their strength during these years. And this is just crazy to me to see how children grow in such a rapid time. This applies directly to what a human being is because God created us individually in his own image. So as we grew up through childhood, I never could understand why my one friend was growing and why they were 5 inches taller than me. And I never understood why. And then I realized that God made us each his own separate way, and that he saw us in his own image, and he wanted everybody to be different, and that's why he made each and every one of us different. So not every person in the world is going to have the same shoe size, the same hair color, the same weight, the same height. And that is something that chapter 7 mentions, and this just relates perfectly to the worldview question of, what is a human being? And I feel like that question is answered in chapter 7. Have a great week, everyone.